Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot, where we upgrade our lead generation. Today, we're going to dive into what it takes to host a virtual event. First, I want to remind you that I really like hearing what kind of topics you want to hear, and you can talk to me through our listener line at 613-703-7073. You can also fill out the feedback form on the Funnel Reboot website or catch me on social at Funnel Reboot. I'd love to hear from you, and I promise you, I will try to incorporate what you tell me into a future episode. So to today's talk. Before 2020, many interactions between sellers and buyers were done in person at industry conferences. To attract and retain customers, companies held their own seminars or user group events. Of course, none of us have been driving or jetting around for the past year and a half. I'm recording in late 2021 here. And as of now, here in Canada and elsewhere, we have filled the void with virtual events. Now, these are more than just webinars. If you have been an attendee at one of these, it's likely been a paid affair, although it's been cheaper than an in real life event. Virtual events pack quite a punch, enabling you to interact with others. You can take part in a breakout session. You can ask speakers questions, take their polls, of course, see keynotes, and you can also sit at virtual tables during the breaks to chat and network. And while it's unclear whether we will keep using virtual events as much once face-to-face meetings return, there is no denying they've got powerful advantages. I'm speaking to someone who knows more about virtual events than almost anyone. Throughout the pandemic, he's been a vital resource running very large events for international organizations and corporations. How did he get so knowledgeable about virtual events in such a short time? It's because he has considerable experience running physical events. How did he get into that? Well, a dozen years ago, he was earning his living as a saxophonist, and he moved to my city, Ottawa. He got together a couple of musicians and founded a saxophone ensemble. But it's hard to find out who wants to book you for their next work function or wedding when you aren't known. So in order to get gigs, he started attending chambers of commerce events. And a funny thing happened on the way to him getting gigs for his band. The entrepreneurs at these events, like himself, weren't given much opportunity to say what they did or meet other entrepreneurs. And sometimes it was them holding themselves back because they lacked networking skills. Now, while he did get musical gigs through these events, he saw it as the chance to make a momentous decision and create his own event that would bridge the gap between these small businesses and focus on networking. He started hosting quarterly events, which came to fill some of the city's largest venues, including all sorts of dignitaries and thousands of people. And he taped them and put over 700 videos of them on his YouTube channel. And when the pandemic hit, well, he took that experience running physical shows and quickly pivoted to running virtual events for other people and other organizations. Can also be heard on a podcast series that he regularly records. And you can also follow him on social media. He's easy to spot. He'll be wearing his ever-present fedora. Let's go now to a talk with my friend, Jarrod Goldsmith. I'm really glad to welcome Jarrod Goldsmith. Welcome, Jarrod.
Thanks so much for having me, Glenn. It's a pleasure being here.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. So you have a fervor about events and the role that events can play in helping people. Can you tell me a little bit about why you are so big on events?
Sure, thank you. Well, over the years, some of my backstory, attending events originally to get gigs for the band and connecting people, helping to them, having them realize the purpose of networking through hosting my own events in person, it seemed like the right thing to do. And then when COVID hit, well, everyone had no choice to wake up, and I came across this amazing virtual platform, changed my life. So not only am I reaching people perhaps in my city, but it's global. And a lot of people think Zoom, oh, that's the only platform they know. Well, there's quite a few alternatives. And that's what I've really honed in on.
That's great. Events serve a number of different purposes, right? You can have a user event where it's people who have already all become customers of something. You can have networking events where people are simply mingling freeform. I think for marketers, where they get really interested in this is what are the possibilities with events where there is one party organizing them, and that party has either a message or an actual product to entice that audience with. So they're coming to an event for a reason, whether it's to be entertained, whether it's to be informed, whether it's to find out who else is in their tribe, right? These are all things that really get a marketer excited about why you should have events. Do you think that events lend themselves well to those kind of uses?
Oh, for sure. There's a variety of uses. I mean, I like to say that any time people need to connect, there's an option they could do it virtually, perhaps even more adaptable than in person. Can be much more efficient. Yes, organizers have a purpose for why they're creating events. Is it to educate? Is it to find leads, like a funnel rather? Is it to bring like-minded people together? Is it to raise money, charities, XYZ reasons? It's finding the right opportunity and the right platform that suits the needs, and also for your attendees.
It's a great point. Let's talk though about some of those maybe drawbacks. Events of all sorts have a drawback, right? If I'm going to go to a personal conference, then like in person, even having a ball game that's going on in the same town where I want to be, people skip out on the sessions, or maybe a organized group event that they want to put on just to go catch the ball game. So there's pros and cons to everyone. What would you say though are the things that we have to watch for with a virtual event? Things that might kind of be things we're already battling with when we're asking people to connect from their house, their kitchen table, wherever they might be, maybe their office, to join into an event.
Sure. Well, I'm the first one to say, Glenn, is nothing will ever beat the face-to-face networking. Connecting with people, you see the whole body language, you see how they react, the tone of voice, and it could be a much better lead generator in some ways. But things to watch out for virtual events, like I said, it can be so much more efficient. Like when I do career fairs, for instance, it's much easier for job seekers to connect with the right person, send their virtual resume, it goes straight to the person's inbox. Hopefully they'll see it. And you can meet a much more larger variety of people virtually, much more effectively than in person. Like now, I think most of us are realizing around the world how much more efficient we are. Back-to-back meetings, we don't have to travel an hour or in traffic, etc., find parking. I don't know when I'm going back in person again. I'm just very, very busy. But things to look out for. For virtual events, the onboarding is such an important aspect. For many, technology is not very user-friendly for some. Some people don't even know how to use much of their computer, let alone a new platform. One of the experiences I like to say is I held a few events for high school reunions for some high schools in the States, one from 1962 and one from 1969. So the age, you can imagine, was about 75 and up. And a lot of it had to do with the onboarding.
Yeah.
So for virtual events, people need to know, one, how to use the platform. Two, will it work on their technology? If some people's using, let's say, Windows 7 or Windows 8, it might not be compatible with today's technology. And three, how do you turn your camera microphone on? How do they use it? explaining that to attendees and speakers and stakeholders, sponsors ahead of time, how can they get ROI from a virtual event? All of this needs to be explained ahead of time.
Yeah, there's a fair bit to it, and it sounds like there's a whole process to it. How far back do you think, if someone wants to get a virtual event up and they haven't done it before, they haven't hosted one, what are the differences between how they might do that and how they might book a real venue and think about how they would plan that meeting with people in real life?
Well, when I planned my ESAX events in person, right, I only did them every quarter, every 3 months. I planned a year in advance. There's a lot of moving parts, big venue, bands, entertainment, music, food, all that stuff, volunteers. There's a lot less moving parts for virtual events, but it still takes a fair amount of planning. I've had some clients who say, "Hey, Jarrod, I'm hosting an event in 4 days. Can you help me out?" Sure, we make it happen. You know, as long as they know what's happening when, they have a structured agenda, who's coming up on stage, what's happening, a show flow.
Yep.
As long as people provide that detail, that's fine. And then we handle the rest. But more time obviously is better to plan. And people think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the point that you brought up about the show flow, it actually points out that there needs to be a plan. For people who haven't done these before, they're usually like a landscape sheet of paper, or you can use a spreadsheet, and you're blocking out those times, but you're also going down columns like who is on sound and who is muted. You're going into aspects like who actually is the main person whose face is on the screen versus if you're doing a panel, or there's all these things that you got to have that big block diagram, right?
Oh, yes. And we talk about a show flow. Have you ever been to an event and the organizer doesn't really know what's happening? It seems to be out of control. It's not organized.
Awkward.
And it's awkward. People can see that. With a virtual event, well, okay, maybe the first 20 minutes are open networking. Well, how do attendees network? Is there an opportunity for some... I always come on and give a 30-second spiel. Here's what you need to know for the platform. And then we network, and then we go into the presentation mode, and then I just follow the script. What videos do I share? Is the link in the show flow? Well, I don't want to need having to search for a link when the event is live. I need all this information ahead of time. So it's being organized. And are your speakers on? Is your technology working? What are you sharing a PowerPoint? Okay, where's the PowerPoint? Is it accessible? Do you have it open on one of your screens? There's a lot of parts, but the more organized you are as an organizer, the better experience attendees will have. Doesn't matter if it's in person or virtual.
A good process is a good process, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you encourage people to try doing a dry run?
Oh, all the time. Not only for the attendees, but also for the stakeholders and speakers, people coming up. Because, again, most people are using a different platform. There's so many out there. They need to know what to do. How do you share a PowerPoint? How do you share a video? Or am I, as the behind-the-scenes organizer, doing it on your behalf? I was doing an event. I do a lot of events, but one of the other days, the speaker came on, didn't have an opportunity to attend a dry run. There's 400 people on the platform, and they couldn't share their PowerPoint. They didn't know how. So I had to get up on screen, and it's embarrassing for the organizer for me to explain it in front of everybody. Well, if they would have attended one of the 3 dry runs prior, they would have known what to do.
Completely. It's gonna, Murphy's Law is gonna strike, right? On that note, you talk about big events. I know, for example, as of the time of this recording, you are a week away from an event which I'm very fond of, TEDx Canada. These are highly polished and highly attended events, and they're charged for. Maybe you could just tell me on the spectrum of things, just so we don't overwhelm people here. When you bring it down to, let's say, smaller events, maybe a dozen people, maybe it's an internal team building session that you have to run. Are there things that you can, let's say, leave out, and maybe not overwhelm yourself when you're just trying to do something small scale? What if you could kind of boil it down to the essentials what would you leave out?
Oh, a lot of the times when I give demos for clients, prospective clients, I don't tell them every bell and whistle they need to know. Like when you're helping someone with the marketing, you don't need to explain how they do the analytics.
Right.
So it's the larger, bigger picture. And
Yeah.
let's say for something like TEDx Canada, they're very organized. It's a pleasure to work with them. They know what they want. They know their branding, their graphics, all that good stuff. And breaking it down, like I said earlier, onboarding, having people know what to do when. Do the videos work? Are they listed as unlisted or public? If they don't work as a private video, you won't be able to share them, etc. All of this can be done ahead of time so that there's nothing left to chance, unless there's a power failure. That's a killer for virtual events. I do have a little bit of a backup. I have there's nothing worse than
Yeah.
something were to happen. So I have one of those backup battery powers. I could last for about 5 minutes. My colleague in Toronto could take over if something were to happen to me.
Wow. Yeah.
But
I've been on an event I was hosting when there was a internet outage both on Wi-Fi and data. So yeah, for a good 5 minutes there, we were just SOL.
Yeah. I mean, there's, in terms of what we could plan for, we what was the expression? Plan for the best, plan for the worst, hope for the best.
That's right.
Yeah. But, Bell was digging in front of my house for the last month. They cut my wires twice. I was in the middle of an event. Everything shuts down. There's nothing I could have done about that, even though I asked them that morning not to do it.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but you have to have contingencies in place for a virtual event in case something like that happens. And I would suggest as a best practice, if it's a small event, okay, fine. But if you're doing an international conference for, let's say, some states like that I've been working on,
yes,
one of my contingencies is to have a colleague in a different city manage the event at the same time. And let's say a speaker is sharing a PowerPoint. Well, I have the PowerPoint on my side, flipping through the slides in case that person loses connection and they can't share anymore. I would just drop off and pick it up. So the attendees might only notice a 5-second blip. It's happened.
Yeah. You were talking about things that like platforms have, bells and whistles, extra stuff. Like, let's maybe just run through a few of those. I know that if we were recording this in 2019, a lot of these would sound foreign, but we don't have to spend long on them because work from home and the pandemic made it, these became very familiar, right? But let's just run through things like starting with a sign up, right? So do you have to find a platform, or do you favor finding a platform where the sign up is included, or are you okay with ones where people are sent to a outside sign up tool and then those, attendee information lists come into the platform?
Sure. Well, it depends on the platform. Like if you use something like, Zoom, or actually, that's not a good example. Some platforms have registration embedded in it.
Yep.
But I think a lot of us are already comfortable using a platform, let's say like events.com or Eventbrite.
Yep.
I'm pursuing to events.com. I love those guys. And then once you register, then in the confirmation checkout email, hey, thanks for attending our events, you might be given the link to attend the actual event.
Right.
I think that's perfectly fine these days.
All right.
And it makes the platforms much more accessible. So if some platforms don't offer such a ticketing option, then you could still use whatever ticketing platform you like, or your own internal ones, they say through your website.
Yes.
Or if you don't want to send so many emails to people a few days before the event, send everybody who registered an email. Thanks for joining us. Here's the link you need to use.
Yes. And, marketers are all about the list. So having those kind of options at your disposal, it's good. And let's not forget that if it is intertwined with the event itself, not only would a registrant list be valuable, but a attendee list would be valuable. Of course, those won't be the same lists. We know that not everybody who registers attends.
Oh yeah, the uptick for those who register versus those who attend, it's very different. And much like an in-person event, you mentioned a ball game earlier. If you spend $100 going to a networking event where you're in a suite, there's food, chances are you're going to show up because you have a lot of money invested in it.
Yep.
Or a 500-person conference in person.
Yep.
Virtual, when people have skin in the game, they're much more likely to show up. And I realized this 10 years ago when I started hosting events. The first few ESAX events I did back in 2012 were free. And it was very, very low attendance. And then
but very high registration.
Yes. And it's even more so virtually. You might find, you might have 200 people who register for a virtual event, but only 85 show up. Oh, it's a nice weekend. I'm spending time with my kids. I'm going to vacuum the house instead, or something on Netflix.
Yep.
So why would people want to attend your virtual event? And this comes down to the marketing side of it. What is in it for your attendees? Do they need accreditation, like for academics or schooling?
Yep.
Do they have to show up? Is there an opportunity for them to find a job? Let's say a career fair. Is it to network? Is it to learn content? Again, it comes back to what we were talking earlier about the purpose of your event.
When it comes to a virtual event, I'd like your take on this, because I do think that there are some things that are a little different than how people consider making an in-person event. And an in-person event, at least for the speakers, you may want the most knowledgeable person, maybe even somebody who is rather long-winded. I would say, though, on virtual events, you might want to select instead for the people who are most vibrant and maybe who can condense what they need to say and to give it somewhat briefly. You yourself said earlier, you can get so many things done, for example, in a speed interviewing career fair setting. Well, the same is true for our attention spans when we're listening to speakers, right? We value, in virtual events, I think more than real events, someone who's engaging but to the point. And as long as they're keeping us with a high energy level and they're keeping, on track to getting to that point, I think that's a good thing. What do you think?
That's a really good suggestion, Glenn. I've been on events where I'm chatting with a Nobel Prize winner in medicine, or the lead singer of Glass Tiger, or some high profile folks. If you're not enthusiastic on camera, why do people care? You could have the most amazing background and experience, but it's like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
And it's like in person or virtual, but virtual, you only have the experience from the waist up in many cases.
Yeah.
Finding people who are enthusiastic, okay, well, often they charge. If you want to get somebody to come on to your in-person event, they might charge $20,000 to attend. Virtual, they might charge a lot less or do it for free. But one of the main values of a virtual event is your reach as an organizer is global. You could reach the most well-known, respected person in your field, and depending on the time zone and their availability, they might say, "Sure, I'll give you 20 minutes of my time."
Yes.
Instead of having to have them pay and spend 2 days in the airport coming over to your city.
Yeah.
And not only for your finding speakers that might accommodate your guest list or the reason for your event, but your attendance is often global as well.
What do we have to think about there?
Time zones. And, it's easy for somebody in Berlin, let's say, to purchase a ticket if you charge in Canadian or US dollars.
Yep.
How does that work? It has to be a simple process. Can they find the event? Are you reaching those people in a different city, or are you reaching people with a certain interest, like a subject matter? Again, I'll leave that to the marketing experts like you guys. But for an organizer, like you said, there's pros and cons to hosting a virtual event. I think the pros outweigh the cons. Well, not that we have much of a choice in the matter these days, but it's what they do with it. Like, if you're organized as a regular, like, in-person event planner, that will be magnified. If you're good at business, you might find opportunities where people have not seen them.
All right. Yeah. And if they're well known, but people haven't had a chance to see them, I read that as being they'll get a lot of demand, right? That would be a nice hook for people to say, yeah, I'm going to sign up for that. I've heard that person's name, or I've seen their book all over the place, but I've never heard them.
Oh, yeah. And when you are able to bring in a big draw, it doesn't matter if it's in person or virtual, again, that could be the hook, like you mentioned. Give people a reason to attend. Like some of the events I've had Brett Wilson from Dragon's Den here in Canada attend some of my events in person and virtually. And for people who've watched Dragon's Den or read some of his books, they know of him. They want to hear some of that wisdom. And if they don't have to spend $400 attending an in-person event, and I don't have to spend $30,000 hiring him, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yes.
And for those organizing virtual events, always think bigger. If there's an expert in your industry, like somebody who wrote 20 books and who live in, I don't know, in South Africa or whatever, you have nothing to lose. The worst that can happen is they won't reply back.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And they're just going to look at it in their time zones. I like your consideration, though, about thinking, we need to imagine, let's say, East Coast, North America, and Europe. Or if someone listening to this wants to run something that captures West Coast and Pacific Rim, you do have to kind of play to the times of day where you can hopefully accommodate people so that they're not getting up at ridiculous hours.
Well, yeah, there's never going to be a good time that accommodates everybody, obviously. And when you host dry runs, it's always a good idea to host several different times throughout the day or the week leading up to your event.
Yes.
Just to offer the most amount of opportunities for not only your attendees, but again, your speakers and guests, and rather stakeholders.
So we've talked about some of the features that, you would use. And mainly the ones we've dwelled on are things that a keynote would use, the slides. We haven't mentioned it, but I know some platforms offer a whiteboard and they can, doodle while they're talking through something. But there's a big aspect to the virtual events that specific virtual event platforms have gotten really good at, which is breakout rooms and chat. Can you tell us a little bit about, that seems to me like the last bastion of what in-person events had that was missing from my standard Zoom call. So tell me what that does, and most importantly, does it work?
It depends on the event. Like, if you're having a family reunion, you want everybody in the same room, Zoom might work perfectly fine.
Okay.
You see 20 of your family members and everybody has a good time. But as you all know, as I'm sure all of your listeners will know well, you can only have one person talking at a time. If you're trying to brainstorm a business idea with 20 people or more in a room, it just doesn't work. It's not possible. And people are talking over, they forget to unmute their camera when the dog is, or their microphone rather, when the dog's barking, except kids are crying. We're used to it. We work from home, most of us. So finding a platform that can accommodate, let's say, the different breakout rooms, easily bouncing between the rooms. How do you chat with them? Is the platform you use accessible that way? What if you need closed captioning? There's a variety of options out there. And like I said, since COVID, they've been popping up left, right, and center, all these platforms. So finding,
Yeah, I was surprised. You yourself invited me onto one of these sessions, and I was a bit skeptical, but it had an interface which took my avatar, right? So I guess grabbing from LinkedIn or whatever profile I had signed in with, and I could simply place that at a table and in a grid basically designed to look like a room full of tables. If someone else sat down at that same table beside me, then poof, we're automatically into a session where we're looking at each other and we're able to talk just as we would on a Zoom call, but it's completely happenstance.
oh yeah,
that's what we're talking about.
Oh yeah, I'm known for networking, and when I was looking for a platform myself, like the week COVID hit, I realized, sure, I could cry in my pillow and wait for the government handouts. As a full-time musician and a live event planner, I was done. I had no choice but to do something about it. And then the entrepreneur in me kicked in and said, okay, yeah, again, I could wait for government handouts and hope to get back to normal. But I'm thinking, no, this is the future. And if I don't adapt, I'm not going to be in business. And then I came across a platform that, exactly like you're saying, easy to view. Let's say you're looking from a camera pointing down on a ballroom. You see different tables. And what I like most about it is the platform I use is each table is a standalone separate table. You're only talking face to face with people in your table. But you could see everybody else sitting at the different tables. So there's my friend Glenn. He's in the table next to me. Hey, Glenn, you're trying to wave, but they can't see you because you're at a different table.
Right.
Oh, okay. See you later, folks. I have to go chat with my Glenn Schmeltzley before I leave. And I double click into your table, and then you and I are having a one-on-one conversation. It is the most accessible, easy platform. It is a game changer, and that's what I became an expert on.
And I think, and you'll probably agree with me, there's something that even though it takes a moment to use technology like you would walk from table to table, but the minute you do it, I think what surprised me was how all the hardwiring in my brain that is made for networking comes alive. All I had to do was see the other person at the same table as me. We're both brought on camera with each other. Actually, I'm breathing a sigh of relief and going, okay, well, now I can just be me.
Oh yeah, that's right. And we're all missing the hugs, the virtual, the handshakes, the clap on the back, all that sort of thing. I can only imagine how much hugging is going to be going on when we go back in person. But until then, it's business from the waist up. And how do we manage that? And it can be very simple and rewarding and refreshing to see people you might not have connected with much over the last, how long, 2 or 3 years.
Do we have anything to think about as hosts with either in those rooms or in chat, moderating? And I mean that both in a good and bad way. Mainly the issue would be that you want to foster people meeting each other, not staying, as the saying would go, at the back walls of the ballroom. How do we coax or entice? Do we let them know that this is going to be happening prior to the event so that they're all geared up?
A couple of options. I mean, again, depends on the event. Sure, you could have a table moderator sitting at each table. But again, on my platform, it's up to the individual to bounce between tables. Sure, there's always going to be the wallflower in person. They're hanging by the bar. They're shy. They hang around their table because they know people there from their business. Virtual events a bit different. There's also a shuffle feature. I click a button, and everybody is shuffled to a different table. They have no choice but to interact with you. Again, for a networking event, that's great. But for, say, a 2-day conference, it might not be applicable. So again, we talked about the bells and whistles earlier. This is one of the features. Each whiteboard, again, on my platform, is a separate standalone table. You could have one person brainstorming a dog sitting company and another table talking about aerodynamics.
Okay.
They're entirely separate from one another, but you could still communicate with them in a different table. It really is a game changer.
Yeah. The notion of having these people in that you can move around, like you said, shuffle, or I'm even thinking of the use of the stage. I mean, there are opportunities now to, if you wanted to have a short Q&A after a keynote speaker is, all of a sudden your audience become, the questioners. And man, that's actually an area where virtual events are easier. There's nobody running with a cordless mic through a gauntlet of tables, right? You just look at their hand raised and you go, all right, you're on. Ask your question.
Yeah. And depending on the needs of the event, I mean, if it's included in the scheduled agenda of the organizer, yeah, you can accept questions from anyone in the attendance. Or you, as a panelist, can even post a question to yourself anonymously. Nobody has to know where it's coming in from. And I like to say to my panelists, often people are shy. They don't want to get the ball rolling. So throw yourself a low-hanging fruit question, and nobody knows it came from you. And then it would encourage people to get started that way. It's like
it seeds the conversation for sure. For marketers who are always thinking about how there's maybe branding or awareness building opportunities, possibly sponsor opportunities, is it possible for these platforms to allow you to drop logos to, I know you can do intros, this current presentation is brought to us thanks to, but, are there opportunities for that?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. That's an important aspect. Let's say for a stakeholder or people trying to judge ROI, why would somebody sponsor an event? Well, they want access to your market to hopefully get a gig. get some clients out of it. How do they manage that? Depending on the platform, sure. You could have a PowerPoint presentation right before a speaker. Hey, this segment brought to you by so-and-so. Sure, you could drop a link in the chat feature. But there's other platforms where you could have the sponsored logo on the floor plan itself. You could have the graphic of let's say the lead sponsor, let's say at the top right of the screen. Everybody sees it all the time. It's, we talk about brand recognition. And you could have, in my case, when I host my own events, I sell the individual tables or booths. And we have somebody from the business sitting at that table with in some cases, their brand there.
Of course.
And then it really is very versatile. And then, at least on my platform, as an organizer, we could download, the attendance list. And I could tell you how many people and who they are who clicked on your logo, let's say your sponsored graphic, and how many of them went to your website or the lead that you want to direct people to. Not all platforms do that, but some do.
And here's an interesting thought. It's long been the right of sales reps to be sent to in-person trade shows. And, when it comes to, let's say, the cocktail hour, yes, they're the one who's there. But again, another area where virtual widens it is if you have a person who's out in front of your organization, maybe one of the founders or a C-level, you could say to them, we wouldn't ask you to get on a plane and give up 3-4 days to, stand at a trade show just for those opportunities. But could you give us half an hour when we'll have you sitting at that table and have people who want the opportunity to speak with you to approach you?
Oh, absolutely. It's like some of my C-suite executives, clients, or multinational companies, the CEO of a 50,000 person company, their time is pretty valuable. But their business, their organization can squeeze them in for a 20-minute chat in front of all of their staff.
Because it boggles my mind when I've gone in-person events, I know the money they're spending for the sponsorship package. And all you ever see is maybe that quick keynote speech that somebody comes in and they're whisked out. And I don't have a chance to talk with anybody from that brand. So it's kind of squandered. But to make the virtual event personal as well as have all of that brand impression, I think that's a powerful combo.
Oh, it really is. And some platforms, your avatar, you can include your social media content, a website, Facebook link, booking, Calendly URL in some cases. Although I think I have mine going to my YouTube channel. But imagine going to an event virtually. Instead of giving a business card, you click on somebody's avatar. It opens up into a new window right to their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And here's a valuable piece of advice, Glenn, I think your listeners will like. Virtual networking can be so much more effective because, let's say you see somebody in the next room or you're talking to somebody face to face. Let's say, Glenn, I'm talking to you right now in an event. I would just say, click on your website or your LinkedIn profile. I would search you out while I'm talking to you face to face.
Yep.
We could talk about body language and
we've all done it.
And I said, hey, Glenn, I didn't know you went to Earl of March High School. So did I.
Right.
That's amazing. And what teacher did you have? That type of personalized connection is gold. That is not possible when you're in person.
Yeah, I would say for anyone who's attending events, it's really wise to take those few extra minutes, even for your own self. You don't know what the career options could bring. Attach your social media profiles to that main avatar. The only good can come from it. And you've highlighted some ways that I didn't even think of.
And also be consistent with your profile and your graphics, across the different platforms. Although that's what's the word? Good and bad, right? You're searching somebody online in LinkedIn, but like in person, when you're looking at somebody face to face, you give them attention. If you're looking at the stock market or your emails on a different screen, you're not paying attention. You're not staring at the screen, at the camera.
Yes.
People see that and it comes across as you're not paying attention to them.
There is etiquette that we all should be paying attention to from that point. Got to play devil's advocate for just a second here. It is great that there are these platforms out there, but people are also hearing from the likes of Facebook and they're hearing from the likes of Zoom. But I'm thinking more of the social networks where they say, well, we have your profile already. There's no need to go anywhere. You can just set up, something, the recent announcements about the workspaces that Facebook is trying and augmented reality. What do you say to that? Are we wise as either hosts or attendees to look at those as solutions, or should we stay away?
Well, all of the social media platforms are geared to try to get you on to stay there. Obviously, YouTube, they want to keep you on YouTube. Facebook wants to keep you on Facebook, etc. If it works for you, great. Is it easy for other people to use? Maybe. Or is everyone on the planet, they know about Facebook? Sure.
Yep.
If Facebook came out with a virtual platform, will people try it? Absolutely, they would try it. Does it have the features you're looking for? Maybe. I mean, it's a matter of figuring out, like I said earlier, about what your needs are. If you could keep everybody on Facebook and it's simple, the security is good, and your sponsors are happy, then why not? Why would you need to learn a whole other platform?
The counter to that would be that we don't know if Facebook will always have it there. And although we don't think about it at the beginning, at some point in time, we're going to want to have that list. And we will remember at that point that we don't own it. So I think I agree with you that it can be used, but I think a good host would, while you're on that platform, have off ramps. And they may even be just, hey, would you like to find out about the next event like this? Okay, drop your email over here. Email is not going to be corrupted by any platform anytime soon. It is, once you have an email, you own that. So you can use it for what you need, but it's rented land. So keep that in mind and remember that the landlord always has the final say.
Well, for sure. Facebook, I heard they're very territorial when it comes to the data, as everyone else should be as well. But The virtual platforms you use, usually the attendance list can be downloaded. At least in my case, it shows you the name, email, and when they registered for an event, if they logged in, and when they logged out, and how many minutes they were logged in for.
Good. Dwell time.
And then there's even many more analytics we could download from how many average interactions did people have, how many times did people bounce between tables, how many times did they have chats. Like, we can get very specific with analytics. And you're an analytics guy, aren't you? You love this stuff.
Absolutely.
Me, not so much, but my clients, some of them are. So they love this.
I mean, any marketer listening to this is thinking of that and understanding that there's a gradation of engagement. Some people, showed up for a minute. Some people stayed the entire time. I know if I'm working beside a sales team and that sales team is saying to me, give me the people who I can talk to from that event and try to get them into a sales discussion, I'm not going to give them all. That would be folly. And I'll torch my reputation with sales if I do.
Sure.
But if I have metrics, like you said, perhaps the ones who were most engaged for the longest, or if there were key sessions that they caught that seemed to show a commercial intent, right? Those would be the things that would make them worth passing on. Hey, I wanted to ask, what's your take on offering recordings? Do you think that that's of much value, or do you think that it's something people ask for but rarely gets used?
I do it quite often. Some platforms are easier to record than others. Or there's also third-party screen sharing platforms like Loom or StreamYard or Video. There's a variety of ones, or even what you're using now is Zencaster.
Yep.
But the content depends on the client. A lot of my I don't host many of my own events anymore. The clients might say, okay, we don't want it shared anywhere else. We want a private event. We cannot publicly post this. No problem. I just download the recording and send it to them, and they can do whatever they want with it. Sure, I've signed NDAs. Doesn't bother me. I don't mind. But having content that's accessible after the event, that's where the gold is. I call it evergreen content. You'll notice in many of my videos, there's no dates. So I could be posting a video tomorrow, but I recorded 6 years ago. It looks like it's a brand new video. I always suggest that organizers think that like that.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, happy holidays, we're having, getting ready for Christmas. Well, if you post it in February, it's not applicable anymore. But going back, as an organizer, do you want to have your event one and done, or do you want to keep using some of that content for years forward to promote future events? I would say you think of it evergreen, and how can you use that content for future reference, even to increase your brand exposure?
Even when you were running live events, you had B-roll footage from each of them, and that was integral to you getting registrations for the next event.
Oh man, you have no idea how much stuff I have. I have about 15 blooper videos. I'm interviewing somebody and you see a dinosaur walking behind them, 20-foot tall dinosaur. It is phenomenal, Glenn. You could spend hours on the ESAX YouTube channel and just have a ball and learn a lot about entrepreneurship and networking.
So the real kicker question here, and I think it's where people who have listening by now understand how passionate you are about this, and that you have reincarnated yourself as a person who can run these events. Let's talk about the do-it-yourself versus the done-for-you model. What do you counsel people on when they're trying to decide if they should go to somebody who can run the event, or if they should try to do it in-house?
Most people don't want to become an expert on a virtual platform. It's taken me 2 years to gather the experience I've had where I know it inside and out. And for a lot of organizers, they say large associations, they say, hey, Jarrod, I have this event in December or whatever. Can you help me out? Sure, no problem. They send me the sponsor graphics, the logos, date, time. I set up the event. I show them how to use it. On the day of, I manage everything. They put their feet up and relax. It is very simple. Or I have other clients say, hey, Jarrod, teach me the platform. Teach me how to fish. Say, sure, no problem. And then they could sign up for their own subscription. And I'm always available to help them with tech support and to make the event run smooth. It depends on how hands-on people want to get. Like people who are more tech savvy, they want to learn the ins and outs. Sure, no problem. Happy to help. But something we didn't cover, Glenn, is for virtual events, whatever platform you decide to use, it's always a good idea to have live tech support to help your attendees. There's nothing more frustrating for attendees when they can't get their camera and microphone working. They don't know how to go to the different tables or bounce to a different floor, or how do they watch a PowerPoint. Like, having somebody live to help them troubleshoot is key, rather than sending an email and waiting 20 minutes. Hopefully somebody will reply back to you.
Right. I gather that on the higher tiers of most platforms, this is an option.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
good thing to
offer.
look for.
Absolutely. I offer tech support depending on, like, if somebody's having a 400-person event, I'd suggest, okay, maybe 3 or 4 tech staff on site.
Hmm.
So I often get contracted from other people to provide tech support for their events using my platform. And it makes their event runs much more smooth.
That peace of mind and preserving the reputation you've worked so hard to get. That I don't know
because
the price
again,
you can put on
a virtual event, Glenn, comes down to the user experience. If you had, let's say, 400 people at an event and 100 of them write, what a great platform. What's so easy. I had such a great time. Or you had 20 people say, this platform is terrible. Why did you use it? Oh, I couldn't figure it out. It's terrible. Well, you're not going to please everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 was a bit high, but there's always somebody who's not going to get it for whatever reason, or maybe they're just using a DOS computer.
Right.
But we try to minimize that by having people on site helping them out, because again, the whole purpose we're in event planners is to offer an experience that have people wanting more, and that is the same in person or the same virtual. So it's we just have to manage it virtually.
And I think we're going to cap it there, and we're probably going to leave our listeners wanting a bit more. But if they do want to know more, Jarrod, how can they go about doing that?
Oh, thanks, Glenn. ESAX virtual events. They go to esax.ca. And all the information's there. I have videos, or for a lot of fun, you can go check out the YouTube channel, the aforementioned YouTube channel that we talked about, ESAX. I'm sure you'll find a lot of good stuff.
All right, that's perfect. Well, Jarrod, I'm really glad that you were able to take us through virtual events. And for the listener, I'm really glad that you were able to take part in this. And if there is someone else who is dipping their toes in this, or they've run on a small scale and they're thinking of making this a little bit more of a cornerstone in their marketing program, I would encourage you to share this episode with them. And if you have any feedback, go ahead and share it with me on social media. And once again, thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Glenn. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.